You know, the most striking truth about over-responsibility conditioning is that it doesn't work by making you feel small. It actually works by making you feel powerful. We usually assume that a victim is made to feel weak, but in these really high-pressure dynamics, you're often given this perceived power to control someone else's entire internal world. So why does being told you're the only one who can help end up making you feel like a prisoner? Well, that's the core paradox of over-responsibility. It's that moment your own competence, your own care, is turned into the very mechanism of your own exhaustion.
See, this perceived power, this whole idea that you are the one and only regulator of another person's emotional state, it's not empowering at all. It's a cage. It's a really sophisticated framework that takes your greatest strengths, your empathy, your competence, your deep down ability to care, and just methodically weaponizes them against you. You think you're holding the key, but in reality, you're inside the lock. And this right here, this is the core investigation of this whole explainer. How does being lifted up to the status of a rescuer ultimately make you feel trapped? How does a dynamic that starts with you feeling so important, essential, end with you feeling completely erased? This is the central question of over-responsibility, and today we're going to break down the mechanics behind this really powerful psychological system. So here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off by exploring that power cage paradox and defining a key concept called affective labor colonization. Then, we'll map out the specific dependency patterns that start to show up and uncover the psychological drivers behind them. And finally, we'll get into solutions, looking at how to reclaim your emotional property and, maybe most importantly, understand the huge difference between being a partner and being a prosthetic.
Okay, let's dive right in by defining the big system at play here. This isn't just about someone being a little moody or demanding. It's about a systematic cognitive shift that's really designed to reassign emotional responsibility.
The core idea here is called affective labor colonization. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but what it's describing is basically a hostile takeover. In healthy relationships, emotional support is mutual, right? It's a give and take. But in this dynamic, that mutuality gets totally replaced with a formal, unspoken job title. One person gets appointed the official steward of the other's mood. Your job description just quietly changes from caring partner to full-time emotional manager, and suddenly you're responsible for all the inputs, outputs, and quality control.
And what's so interesting about this slide is how clearly it shows that fundamental change in your role. Over on the left, you've got compassionate presence. This is healthy. You care for someone, you're a witness to their feelings, you're sitting with them in their experience. But on the right, you see the shift to biological management. Now you are held responsible for their emotional outcomes. You're not a witness anymore, you're the mechanic who's expected to fix the machine. And if they feel bad, it's now presented as your failure to do your job correctly.
This whole shift is anchored by two really powerful installed belief patterns. First, there's the Omnipotence Hook. This is that constant line of, "You're the only one who really gets me," or "I can't do this without you." It's a hook because it feeds that deep human need to be significant, making you feel absolutely indispensable. Second, and this one might be even more potent, is vicarious liability. This is that conditioned gut-level panic or guilt you feel the second they get upset. It's this immediate physical feeling that you've done something wrong, that their unhappiness is a crime and you're the prime suspect.
And the long-term result of this conditioning is, well, it's profound. You effectively become a human prosthetic. Your main function, day in and day out, becomes regulating someone else's nervous system. Individuals in this spot often talk about what feels like identity colonization, a state where you're so hyper-focused on their emotional state that you actually start to lose track of your own. Your own needs, your goals, even your own sense of self, they just start to fade into the background. So how does this system actually work? Let's break down the repeatable three-step mechanism that builds and really cements this dependency. It's not random at all. It's a systematic pattern of behavioral management, and it's designed to completely redirect your own internal reasoning.
It all starts with step one, the unique competence frame. This is that omnipotence hook put into action. You're repeatedly told you have some unique skill for managing their difficult emotions. Then comes the critical pivot in step two, the false causal loop. A small, neutral action of yours, maybe you're a few minutes late, or it's just your tone of voice, is explicitly blamed for their huge, disproportionate emotional reaction. And your brain, which is literally wired to find cause and effect, starts to buy into this faulty logic. And that leads you right into step three, the stewardship phase. To avoid the pain and guilt from that false loop, you begin to pre-calculate everything. You find yourself constantly scanning, planning, rehearsing conversations and actions, all just to keep their system stable. And that, right there, is the path to self-erasure. And this just perfectly illustrates the psychological trap that three-step process creates. It's a state of externalized regulation. Your brain becomes so conditioned that setting a simple, healthy boundary, like saying, "I need some space," or "I can't talk right now," it triggers the same internal alarm as if you were physically hurting them. Your own self-preservation starts to feel like an act of aggression. And because you are a caring person at your core, you avoid it at all costs, which only tightens the bars of the cage.
So why is this pattern so incredibly effective? To get that, we have to look at the powerful and often totally unconscious psychological motivations that are at play for both people in the dynamic. It's almost never a simple story of a villain and a victim.
This slide really lays out the two sides of that coin. On one side, you've got the goal of accountability immunity. Think about it. If someone can successfully make you responsible for how they feel, then they are effectively immune from being responsible for how they act. Their outbursts or bad choices get reframed as just reactions to your supposed failures. It's a total offloading of personal responsibility. And on the other side, you've got the vulnerability, the deep, very human need for significance. For a lot of people, especially those conditioned to be caregivers, the feeling of being needed can be a way more powerful driver than the feeling of being free. And this dynamic just targets that vulnerability perfectly.
Underneath all of this is a concept called psychological enmeshment. What this describes is a powerful, almost biological tendency to lose the boundary, the skin, between our own emotions and the emotions of someone we're close to. Their anxiety starts to feel like your anxiety. Their anger feels like it's happening inside your own body. Now, empathy is healthy, but enmeshment is when those boundaries just dissolve completely, making you incredibly susceptible to taking on responsibility for feelings that are not yours to own in the first place. Okay, so now that we've mapped out the mechanism and the motivations, let's turn to the most important part, the tools for awareness. This isn't about placing blame. It's about reclaiming your own internal territory by developing what we can call emotional property awareness. There are 3 really actionable steps for this internal work. First, conduct an origin of mood audit. When you feel a sudden wave of anxiety or guilt, just pause and ask yourself, is this feeling actually mine, or have I imported it from someone else? Just creating that space for a question begins to rebuild the boundary. Second, learn to recognize the omnipotence hook. Ask yourself, am I genuinely helping here, or am I being set up as the only one who is allowed to help? That question exposes the whole trap of manufactured significance. And third, actively practice emotional property awareness. This means consciously refusing the job of solving another person's discomfort. It's the practice of compassionate detachment.
Internalizing this next idea, this is the crucial turning point. The phrase on this slide, it's not just a sentence, it's a declaration of sovereignty. It interrupts that neurochemical cycle of conditioned guilt and vicarious liability. It's the fundamental understanding that your purpose is not to be a tool or a device used by someone else to bypass their own journey of growth and self-regulation.
And this brings us to the core lesson of this entire dynamic. It's a fundamental reevaluation of what it truly means to care for another person and what it means to exist in a healthy mutual relationship.
The cycle of over-responsibility. It's rarely broken by some big conversation or confrontation. It's broken internally, the moment you have a profound shift in perspective. You realize that by constantly managing their emotions, by absorbing their instability and pre-calculating their comfort, you aren't saving them. You are in fact preventing them from developing the most critical skill a person can have, the ability to save themselves. Real care means allowing another person the dignity of their own emotional journey, even when it's really painful to watch.
And that's the ultimate takeaway. Your role in any healthy relationship is to be a partner, someone who walks alongside another, sharing a journey of equals. It is not to be a prosthetic, an external attachment they use to compensate for a skill they haven't developed themselves. Responsibility has to end at the edge of your own skin. Your mind is your private territory, and awareness is the key to making sure that no one else's fragility ever becomes the cage for your own life.